A massive audience tuned in for a 58-year-old fighter and a YouTube guy to watch boxing, which proves just how far the sport has fallen over the last 30 years because of dysfunction and corruption inside that sport. We were waiting for something to fill that void. I've got winners and losers of the Tyson and Paul fight. But before we go there, remember to subscribe to the channel by clicking on this button below me. That way, you get notifications when I go live on Sunday nights for Watch DA Live. Complete recap of everything going on, an instant reaction to the NFL weekend, and so that you know when we do deep dives like this one on this channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel right there. Be one with the channel. All right, let's do some winners from Friday night's fight. Number one, the winner has to start with nostalgia because everybody wanted to see and feel what an old school Mike Tyson fight felt like. I had friends of mine with kids that were in their teens who had no idea about Mike Tyson YouTubing Tyson fights. Young people started to recognize again just how ridiculous his fights used to be, just how magical and intense and furious Mike Tyson used to be. So that was a win for nostalgia, as all of us who remember Tyson in his prime just wanted to see the baddest man on the planet do it one more time, especially against that guy, that punk, that schmuck. Also, it helped grow a new generation that had no idea who Tyson was and let them know, yeah, way back when, this dude was box office. You had to watch him. So that was pretty cool. The next biggest winner of this was, unfortunately, Jake Paul, because it proved the type of marketer he is to be able to get that type of audience and that type of mainstream media paying attention to something that he does. And let's face it, Jake Paul has always now worked on the fringe of the sport. And boxing, where it lies in the mainstream, is culturally irrelevant and has been for a long time. Every so often, a fight may break through it, but just barely, just barely. Jake Paul proved that even though he's not really a boxer, even though he's kind of a wannabe athlete, here he is breaking through to the mainstream audience where there's a pretty massive number of people watching that fight, and regular traditional media outlets are covering it and acting as though it matters. It's an exhibition fight, but yet he did it. And it's hard. Through gritted teeth, we give him credit, but you have to, because Jake Paul, through all of his bluster, all of his noise, and whatever persona that is, does draw eyeballs. In this instance, found the perfect fight, the perfect fighter to actually leverage social media popularity with a sports audience that had never watched him before. I would never pay or sit down for a Jake Paul fight, except if it involves Mike Tyson, well then yeah, I'm in. Also, winner is Mike Tyson himself. I mean, I know the fight was not all that exciting. In fact, it was pretty much a dud. But Tyson held his own. Many people, such as myself, desperately wanted to see him knock Jake Paul the bleep out. And yet, at 58 years old, that was never really an option. We hoped, but I mean, come on. The fact that Mike Tyson went all 8 rounds, even if they were abridged rounds, and took a punch. I mean, he stood there and took a punch time after time. He didn't wobble. He didn't fall down. He wasn't on one knee. You know, he got clipped a couple of times, and he kept coming at 58 years old. That's remarkable. And I don't care if that didn't have our huge uppercut, our right hook, the thing that we wanted to see happen so much. The fact that a near 60-year-old could stand in the ring and take punishment and just stand there and keep coming and do it for 8 rounds, that was admirable. It really was. That was admirable. I got to give him that. Also, Mike Tyson's wallet is a winner. $20 million made, reportedly, for that fight. And some reports suggested that Mike Tyson's value these days was around $10 million because he had lost so much money from his playing days. Famously, Don King and others had siphoned off tons of his money from when he actually fought back in the day. So if Tyson doubled his net worth with one fight, hey, that's big. That's really big. And I would also say that in terms of adoration, Tyson felt it again. Man, when he came out with that walkout song and it was just him. It was just him after all of the Jake Paul, Logan Paul in the Cadillac, waving to the crowd like they were in a presidential motorcade. And there was just Mike by himself, an assassin, walking down towards the ring with just the steely glaze in his eye, looking like an assassin. That was cool. For a moment, at least, it felt like the old days. And I think everybody in that crowd was there because they loved Mike Tyson. And so Iron Mike got to feel the love one more time in that ring. And who knows, maybe there's going to be more times if we believe what he said after the fight. Those were the winners. The losers, the audience. I mean, let's just start with the people inside that building. Imagine paying that money to stuff yourself inside that building, AT&T, home of the Cowboys, and getting that. I mean, that was, after a bit of a flurry early and some roars you heard from the crowd, those shrieks that happen in a big title fight. I've been to some big title fights, and there's a shriek that happens when something exciting happens. The last 6.5 rounds of that were just kind of a slow molasses grapple, clinching type of, nothing. It really wasn't nothing. I mean, a couple of shots landed by Jake Paul, but there was really nothing that made you go, wow, can you believe that? So the audience in person was a loser on Friday night. Also, let's make Jake Paul a significant loser for just the attitude. I mean, now you see after he thanks Mike Tyson after the fight and he's so respectful after the fight that everything leading up to it is so inauthentic. And that is why we all hate Jake Paul, because there is no soul there. There is no essence there of who he really is. It is all barking. It is all persona. It is all artificial. It is all social media. And I know that, you've got to give him credit for ginning up attention, but there's also an authenticity that we ask from athletes, and Paul has none of that. Absolutely none of that. Everything for Jake Paul is basically trying to design a famous person on, in some type of lab. Let me say this, then I would do that, then I would look like this. I mean, this is a guy that made viral videos on YouTube by, singing Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen. And now he's covered head to toe in tats. Now he's supposed to be some type of tough guy. It is so obvious that Jake Paul is compensating for being looked at as a teenage turd for a long time. And we see this sometimes with celebrities. We think about others that kind of grew up in the public eye, and now we have this idea of that person, and then that person has to become hard. That person has to become tough. See this with child actors a lot. They try to run from the old persona of like sitcom kid to then becoming an alcoholic, a drug addict, whatever, a tough guy. Drake is this. Drake has been running from the Degrassi High persona for how long? And now he's the hardest dude in rap. I mean, it is always overcompensating, and it was so obvious that Jake Paul was doing that, is doing that, will always do that in this. Also, Paul had some just idiotic comments. I mean, Jake Paul saying, I've wanted this for my entire life, fighting Mike Tyson. And at 15 years old, dancing around like an idiot, that was your dream, to fight Mike Tyson? But of course it wasn't. This happened to be a thing that you realized you could do to make money and to advance your popularity and celebrity. And then Mike Tyson came calling. But let's not act as though this was always the dream. Your dream was becoming famous. It was not becoming a boxer and thus boxing Mike Tyson. Let's get real. I think also, when Jake Paul wins this fight and in the ring, he begins thanking everybody. He starts by thanking the military. Okay, we can all get behind that. There you go. Here's your moment of thanking the military. And then goes into thanking just about everybody, including doctors and farmers. The more people you thank, the less valuable your thanks are. And again, this was where Jake Paul is. And it is just a guy that is paint by number. Okay, I'm going to do this to get that. And that comes off as so inauthentic. If you take one of those and goes, this group is my cause, I want to draw respect and attention to them, fine. When you throw them all in the same bucket, it devalues what you're talking about. So again, a guy that has absolutely zero authenticity. The biggest loser here of the entire night is Netflix, because the narrative of this night is the overwhelming technical issues that the audience dealt with. I know for me, buffering the entire night. In fact, at times earlier in the night before this fight, the whole Netflix, app basically shut down and then asked to troubleshoot. And the troubleshoot was, okay, well, let's check your internet connection. We went through all the diagnostics on my TV and it said your connection is fine. Well, yeah, the connection's fine. It's that your app can't handle this traffic right now. Imagine spending all of the money that Netflix did to put on this circus and to draw Mike Tyson there and then not have the technical bandwidth to execute this. It's insane. It is the biggest loss, the biggest L of the night, that Netflix as an entity didn't project or predict the type of numbers or traffic or attention this would do. The first rule of this stuff, if you want to get into sports and do big events, is be able to handle the audience. They couldn't. Massive loss. Everybody on social media melting down because of the buffering. Ultimately, what we had to do is, as my wife and I were watching this on the TV, we had to be a few minutes behind. I would say we were about 90 seconds behind the live action, and then it streamed smoothly for us the rest. But if we would zoom all the way to the front or all the way to the as live, it would constantly be buffering and staggered and impossible to watch. So who knew that? It just happened that it worked out for us, because I could tell where we were watching and then what social media was reacting to. And I would say we were about 60 to 90 seconds behind. But I mean, come on, Netflix. Also, in terms of losers, us. Because now this is going to be the future of sports, streaming. We've already seen an NFL playoff game on Peacock. We know there's an NFL playoff game coming to Netflix. We know that Thursday Night Football has been on Amazon. We know that the NBA is going to be streaming as well on these devices. If you can't handle this, why should we as the audience be excited about this? It is so depressing to think that the powers that be think they can put these games anywhere, these events anywhere, and we'll just flock to it no matter what, even if their production of it sucks. Because let's also put this out there. Netflix's production of this fight was awful, absolutely awful. Why do we have Rosie Perez and Cedric the Entertainer giving us analysis of boxing? It's because this is just kind of a place where the production company Netflix is a Hollywood enterprise. It's just about Hollywood. And for us as sports fans, what are we getting out of Rosie Perez saying, oh man, they're fighting really hard right now? What are we getting out of Cedric the Entertainer, who really has no background on either fighter besides his memory of what he used to remember from Mike Tyson? That's not breaking anything down. And that, to me, I thought was a huge disservice to an audience. Yeah, there's a lot of people that came to that wouldn't know Andre Ward. Fine. But there's an audience there that doesn't need Cedric the Entertainer to be telling them about boxing. Nobody tuned in going, oh, man, I don't know the announcers. This is not cool. Also, if you're a 13-year-old into Jake Paul, are you also into Cedric the Entertainer and Rosie Perez? Is that moving the needle for teens? I mean, I just thought it was so stupid. And they said so many stupid things. But Andre Ward specifically saying that Mike Tyson resonates because people see themselves in him. How many people look at Mike Tyson's life and say, yeah, I see myself in him? I mean, killer from an early age, sent away to basically be trained to be a heavyweight champion, becoming the single baddest man in the world, then falling into an awful situation where, due to a sexual assault, you go to jail and lose your career. Then you come back and you're best known for biting an ear. Then you become kind of a cartoon of yourself as you get a facial tattoo and end up in the Hangover movies. Then you return to boxing at 57, 58 years old. What part of that do people relate to? It's just, there was all of these types of things that the crew said that you're just like, they're just talking to talk. They actually are not thinking about what they're saying. And I would also say that from a Netflix broadcast, for all of us watching that, it felt more like an SNL sketch than it did a sporting event. Don't demean your audience. That was a pathetic production by Netflix. You got to be better if you're going to do more of these events. You have to be better. Here's my big takeaway, is that this is all set up for more of this. I mean, after the fight, you heard Mike Tyson say, I want Logan Paul next, which, great. So now we just are going to have Mike collect $15 million or $10 million for the next paycheck as he just kind of keeps running through, YouTube, viral, social media people. I mean, I'm all out on that. I don't need to see what I saw last night again when he's even older. So let's hope it doesn't go down that road, because one was fine. In fact, I would say one was more than enough. Finally, as I said at the outset, this was such an indicator that boxing had eaten itself. I mean, the sport goes on. It certainly does good numbers revenue-wise globally. But in terms of a moment that made America feel the way that it did once upon a time, that's been long gone. Whether you go back to, Joe Louis and then through Ali and Foreman and Frazier, whether it's the Sonny Liston days, then fast forward to some of the middleweights and Hagler and Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard, to then ultimately Mike Tyson. There were these people, there were these fighters, there were these fights that America stopped and watched and had to watch and talked about. And the media at large that covered sports wove it into it because it mattered. It doesn't matter anymore. Through corruption, dysfunction, and disorganization, the sport of boxing ate itself. And so there's not moments where the mainstream media at large says, I've got to talk about this fight because my audience cares about this fight. I know I've been doing this for more than 20 years. I can count on one hand the number of fights over those 20 years that I felt like I had to talk about because people watched. And Mayweather-Pacquiao happened well after the fact that it really should have. We just are lacking that. And without that, there's a void. And this filled the void. And I just think that it's so obvious that America would watch and care about big fights, but the sport itself never had a true path to develop the next series of stars. And you think about in the NFL, when the Chiefs are no longer the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes retires, it's not like football shrivels up. We saw that after Tom Brady retired. It just keeps chugging. There's a next wave of stars. We don't expect in 20 years not to care about football. If you love the NBA or you love Major League Baseball, it's not like you expect in 10 years for it not to matter anymore. But that is what happened to boxing. And this is the clearest signal yet that the love of that moment is still there. We just don't have an excuse to get into that moment anymore. Remember to subscribe to the channel, all right, by clicking on this button below me or this button next to me. I appreciate you being here with me. Every Sunday night, watch DA live. We go live at 7 o'clock Eastern time right here on this channel. Make sure you are locked into the channel. Until next time, I'm DA, Damon Amendolara. See you next time, everybody.